What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. We are coming to you after Game 7, the best two words in sports, and maybe even sweeter for the Cavs knowing that they walked away with the W. They came away with a 106-94 victory against the Orlando Magic, and now they're already on their way to Boston, getting ready to face the Celtics on Tuesday. Let's look at some important stats for today's game in the win in Cavs franchise history, shall we? The last time they won a Game 7 in the first round, the Cavs ended up going to the NBA Finals. Shout out LeBron James. That's where we're starting today, Chris. That's where we're starting.
Every podcast so far that we've done in the playoffs has been a trip down memory lane, doing the history of all this stuff. It's amazing.
The history is important because, as you say, Chris, it's history. So it doesn't matter. But the Cavs improved to 6-2 all-time in Game 7s. It's their fourth straight victory in Game 7. The Cavs also had an 18-point comeback, which is the largest in NBA history in a Game 7 since the league started tracking play-by-play. So that's just insane to think about because I don't know when they started tracking play-by-play, but that was a long time ago. So, Chris, I want to get into your thoughts on just the atmosphere, the arena. We'll get into that 18-point comeback, but I want to get your thoughts on Game 7 in Cleveland. It's not your first one. Me and Jimmy, it was our first time. How does it compare for you to other ones you have been a part of?
Oh, geez, you are just setting me up. You kidding me? Like, what
in Cleveland?
No matter what I say here, fans are just going to get pissed. It was great. It was a great atmosphere, especially in the second half when the Cavs were playing much better basketball. I definitely think in the second half the fans contributed, the rally towels being out, the boisterous chants while guys were at the free throw line on both sides of it. But look, like early on in the game, fans were booing. JB Biggerstaff got booed for the second straight time during pregame introductions. Pregame introductions led to JB Biggerstaff getting booed. So I think it was a crowd that showed the tension that has built throughout the course of the regular season, the belief that has faded in this team throughout the course of this regular season, and also that when it's time to turn it on, and when there's an understanding that the team is playing better basketball and it's time to reward them with that level of play, this fan base can crank it up to a level that very few fan bases around the NBA can. So Cleveland showed up. Cleveland was ready. They had the rally towels. They had the shirts. They were ready for a Game 7. But when the Cavs came out and they didn't look ready, they didn't look like they could match the moment, the fans quickly recognized that. They started booing, murmurs, all that kind of stuff. But late in the game, as the Cavs were pushing and trying to hold off the Orlando Magic in the fourth quarter, it was an intense atmosphere. It was a rowdy atmosphere. It became unhinged on multiple occasions. Darius Garland's three-pointer from the corner around the midway point of the fourth quarter, one of the signature moments of today's game, like that caused an uproar that you would expect in a Game 7.
Cleveland showed up. Oh, sorry, Ethan.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Cleveland showed up because the Cavs showed up, right? Like,
That's right.
This is not. You don't get unconditional love around here. Like, you gotta earn it. Early on, it was ugly, man. Biggerstaff got booed. George Niang got booed on the Jumbotron while he was talking about how much the crowd can help during like one of those between timeouts things that they throw on the Humongotron. Like, that was brutal. It got to the point where like you could hear the very few Magic fans in the building chant "Let's go Magic," and one particular free throw trip that Orlando made in the first half there was the PA guy going, "Make some noise," and it's like it felt more like a please. Like,
Yes.
could you? Like it's supposed to be like we all know we're all in on the joke here, but like it sounded like he was really asking.
Yes. So
It
to your
really
point,
did.
Jimmy, since you brought this up, I have to interject here. I sit next to Joe Varden from The Athletic, and Joe Varden and I are very close. We are golf partners. We hang out together on the road. We hang out together in the summertime. So we're very, very close. And I turned to him and I was like, wait, they're starting this already? Usually they reserve this for the second half. Usually they reserve this for the fourth quarter or the final 6 minutes of the fourth quarter. I was like, buddy, they're starting this early. You know it's desperate times here if they're going to start this early in the game. And you're right, Jimmy. Like it felt born out of desperation. Like we got to get something to get this crowd going back on our side because right now they're turning against the team and the players because the players aren't doing anything to earn adulation.
Yeah, but again, eventually it was great.
Yes,
it was rocking. I think it's at the point. I mean, like we'll talk about more about the game in a little bit, but I think as this game progressed, Orlando lost composure, and I think that the crowd definitely played a role in that. It was really loud in there, and it was enough. It was enough stress on a young team to be dealing with the momentum shift of the scoreboard, but to have the crowd swing the way it did alongside that momentum shift was impactful, I think.
Yeah, and just like being on social media and having to do a live blog and trying to get all this information at the same time that the game is happening, I'm looking and seeing all these comments from fans, and there's literally people that were online that switched from this season is over, the game is over, to oh my god, we might have a chance against Boston. Like there ended up being chants in Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse for we want Boston.
A little aggressive, if we're being honest about that one, but that's the thing that you love about fans, right? That's the thing that you love about playoff basketball. The emotional swings from minute to minute, quarter to quarter, half to half. Like, it's great. I love it. Like, when a team loses a game in the playoffs, you get this feeling of they can't possibly win a game in this series. And then when a team wins a game in the series, you're like, they can't possibly lose. There's too much good things that they were doing, and it's just going to carry over to game 2, game 3. But it certainly doesn't work like that. And there is nothing like a playoff series and the emotional swings involved in a playoff series. Honestly, I don't know how people in this front office do it, right? I don't know how JB Bickerstaff does it. I don't know how the players do it. It is such an emotional roller coaster.
It's an emotional roller coaster for me trying to pick an angle to write about during the game. I'm roped up in that. But yeah, the Cavs crowd today was kind of like watching your friend who walks back and forth in front of the TV and yells stuff. It's a fun person to watch a game. That's how I felt watching that crowd today.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys kind of got into it really early. The swing of this game and the fact that this Cavs team has been counted out so many times this season. And almost every time, it feels like we've talked about it on this podcast. This team plays better with its back against the wall. I don't know what it is. I don't know why that might be the case, but when Evan Mobley and Darius Garland were injured in the beginning of the season, other teams were trying to figure out if Donovan Mitchell was available because the team felt like it might be tanking time. Yeah. But the team did not feel that at all. They ended up going on one of the better runs of their season right after that. And then again, when they struggled against the Charlotte Hornets to end the season, the fans were coming back and saying, there's no way we beat the Indiana Pacers to clinch playoff seeding. Then the Cavs did that.
Yeah.
And now in game 7, of the NBA playoffs, the Cavs were down and were down 18 points at one point during this contest and then swung it all the way back to win by double digits. So when I texted our subtexters during the game and talking about the scenarios that we had been talking about with the fans' interactions, how the fans were changing and booing the team on their own home court, how the Orlando Magic fans that were literally grouped together behind the Orlando Magic bench were making more noise across the entire arena than the Cavs fans that were sitting right next to us. I was confused to feel that there were so little believers in a team that has shown that they can come back in scenarios when they've been down by more than 18 points. Remember the Dallas Mavericks game? Remember the Boston Celtics game? Like, those games come to mind. What does, to you guys, what does it tell you in this scenario, of this magnitude, for this team to come back in this kind of scenario? Or is it just that regular season momentum and regular season know-how in these scenarios to be able to do stuff like this?
Look, any playoff series win is going to be difficult. Anyone. And you can't start taking playoff victories for granted. You can't just sit here and say, well, the Cavs did what they were supposed to do against Orlando. Yes, they did. They were the favored team. They were the 4 seed. Orlando was the 5 seed. The Cavs had home court advantage. But it doesn't always work that way. So I think when any team wins a playoff series, understanding how difficult that is, you have to give them credit. Was it as pretty as maybe fans wanted it to be? No. Was it as pretty as people around the NBA wanted it to be? No. Did it answer questions long term about this team? Probably not as many as you would like answered. Did it mean that like every problem, every flaw that they have when it comes to roster construction and when it comes to in-game strategy and stuff like that? Does this win in Game 7, does this series win against Orlando mean all of that stuff is now masked moving forward? No. They still have flaws. They still have weaknesses. They still have problems that they're going to have to address after this series against Boston in this offseason when eventually that comes. But what it is it's a step forward for this organization. It was a meaningful moment for this organization. It was a meaningful moment for Darius Garland and Evan Mobley to come through the way that they did in various ways. Not everybody has to go out and score, 40, 50 points the way that Donovan Mitchell can, the way that Donovan Mitchell does. Everybody has a different role on this team. And to have Evan Mobley in a situation where Jared Allen is once again out because of a bruised rib, step up and grab 16 rebounds and 5 on the offensive end, and have 5 blocks and anchor the paint, anchor a defense that neutralized the Magic and held them to 41 points in the second half, that's a big step forward. That's something that Evan needs in his career, right? For Darius Garland to have some failures in Game 6, especially in the fourth quarter of Game 6, and to learn from those things and to be better because of those things, like, that's a big step forward. That's something that needs to happen for this organization to continue to evolve and progress. So to me, like, this Game 7, some of it, so much of it was about Donovan Mitchell and the brilliance of Donovan Mitchell and the way that, he just would not allow this team to lose and the way that he met the moment. But they also got contributions from other guys across the board. And I think this win against the Magic and how they were able to do it and overcoming the things that they overcame, and exercising some of their playoff demons from last year against the Knicks, and understanding the opportunity that slipped away from them in Game 6 on the road against the Magic. To me, this was a team that grew up a little bit today in Game 7. And when they needed to, they made the plays that are required of a team to make when it comes to Game 7 playoff level basketball. We asked, coming into this game, who is going to rise up and match the moment. And look, there were various points throughout the course of the game where the answer was nobody but Donovan Mitchell. Maybe nobody but Donovan Mitchell and Karis LeVert. But like by the end of the 4 quarters, and a basketball game is 4 quarters, you can't ignore things in the first half and just focus on the second half, just like you can't ignore things in the second half and just focus on the first half. It is the total, right? And after 48 minutes of a game 7, a lot of different guys in a lot of different ways found a way to match the moment, and they were able to handle the magnitude of a game 7 playoff game well enough that it represents a step forward for the organization to me.
We talked earlier in the series about how immature some of those road Orlando losses felt. The way, and in the Cavs' worst moments, you worry that they're a front-running team, right? Like they get,
for sure.
We've used enough boxing metaphors in this with this team the last couple of years to fill an arena in Las Vegas, but like get hit in the face and you're just done. You just get dropped. How like or the first 2 Orlando, I mean, it was like really stunning to see how little fight they offered in those games once the Magic went on runs. I think the last 3 games of this series, they showed growth in that area, but obviously today is the culmination of that, right? Like even earlier, like if this had happened in game 1, if that same script opens game 1 of this series, I don't think we're getting a similar result to what we got today. They're certainly not coming back and winning by double digits. I'm very confident in saying that, but I don't think they win the game. I wouldn't be surprised if they lost the game ugly. And I think that represents growth in a large holistic sense, because last year, again, against the Knicks, you get punched, you kind of fall down. That's the story of a couple of those games. That's the story of the series. I just kind of like after the first 2 games, the good response in game 2. The game 5, in that series was ugly, man. You could see that team was ready for that series to be over. You know what I mean? And I got that kind of feeling at the beginning of the first half of this game, but they overcame that. To Chris's point, a lot of signs of individual growth in this series too, right? Like Karis LeVert was lost, hidden on the bench in game 6, and kept them afloat at times in the first half. Really important. It might not get remembered by history. I'm writing about Karis for tomorrow morning, but like that was a very important stretch where Karis was consistently generating offense, and he had some very important shots that he created for others late in the fourth quarter. Darius closed the game. He led the team in scoring in the fourth quarter.
He did.
After really struggling for most of this game. Also had 3 steals in this game, and like not one of the steals. I watched all 3 of them back. One was kind of a weird, dumb pass by a Magic player, but like he had to have good hands to grab it. But the other was like gritty, like snuck up behind someone and took the ball and fighting for standing his ground. Another instance today. I think I noted this after game 1 where Paolo really just threw his body into Darius. Darius just took it and kept defending. Isaac Okoro realizing that the Paolo Banchero assignment is a marathon, not a sprint, because man, those first 100 meters, Paolo was moving. He looked like this is the kind of guy who can win a game 7 by himself. They wore him down over the course of the game. There are numerous examples of this, and I'm with Chris in that. Still got a long way to go, and those "we want Boston" chants may come back to haunt you in a little bit here. But take every step up the ladder counts.
Right.
And the Cavs took a step up the ladder today.
Yes, and every playoff series, guys, requires something different. And what it ultimately requires at the very end is just finding a way. somehow, some way, answering the challenge, responding to a team's runs, making the adjustments in the second half that you need to make. Like, it doesn't matter that the Cavs' margin for victory over 7 total games in this series is one of the worst in playoff history. It just does not matter, because it was about finding a way against this specific opponent in this specific matchup in this specific situation. And just because one thing happened in one series, it doesn't mean it's going to happen in another series. I was talking to a member of the organization about this before Game 7 today, and we were talking about the Cavs in 2018, the final year of LeBron James. They went to the finals, right? Anybody remember the first round playoff series? It was against the Indiana Pacers. It went to 7 games. Like, Victor Oladipo tormented their dreams for 7 straight games. He would just retreat to half court and blow by everybody. It took LeBron being, LeBron, supernova LeBron, for the Cavs, a team that a lot of people thought could advance to the NBA Finals, to beat the Indiana Pacers. But that didn't prevent them from going to the NBA Finals. And this isn't me saying, well, the Cavs beat the Magic, so they're going to the NBA Finals. No. I'm just saying every series requires something different. And I always say this in golf. There are no pictures on a scorecard. You just find a way to make a number.
I love how you hated on my stat earlier about the 2018 team, but you came back to that same notion. I see what you did there, Chris.
I used it as a reference point, Ethan. That's it.
That's fair, but I'm saying, I was talking about that 2018 Game 7, Game 2 now. Okay. But
okay, fine. I'll use a different one for you.
Oh,
the Boston Celtics, when they won their championship with Kevin Garnett, Rajon Rondo, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen, they went 7 games in the first round against the Atlanta Hawks. I don't think they won a single game on the road against the Hawks. That didn't mean they weren't a great team. That didn't mean that, you shouldn't give them praise for getting out of that playoff series. It was just all about finding a way. Now the Cavs have to deal with a different monster. We'll get to that later in the podcast.
We'll get to that tomorrow when we preview the game. Today's about Game 7. But that's funny. I was just trying to make a joke and Chris had to stat me down. That's fine. But I wanted to... We talked about yesterday and how we talked on the podcast about how everybody needed to step up. I think it's safe to say everybody except for one player on the Cavs stepped up in Game 7.
Come on. That's so mean.
That's the reality of the situation, is it not? Is it not?
It is. Who else it's just unnecessary from the top rope, if we're being honest.
Look, you did. I'm assuming we're referring to the artist formerly known as George Niang right now.
Yeah, the 3 minutes. The 3 minutes that just weren't
fair point. Are we putting Marcus Morris's first half minutes in the Hall of Fame? I don't know about
Hall
that.
Hall of Fame.
That's what I'm saying though. It's not just George. Marcus didn't play in the second half. Tristan barely played in the second half. So let's not single the guy out. He's already having a tough playoffs.
Yeah, here's the thing.
Not. Oh my God.
The Cavs got enough support. The Cavs got enough support around Donovan Mitchell. We can phrase it that way, Ethan.
I'm getting bullied today. I don't like it, okay?
That's because you're trying to bully George. Bullies get bullied.
I'm not bullying George. I think I wrote the most George Niang stories out of the 3 of us this year. Anyway, I think that even when Tristan Thompson didn't play a whole lot of minutes, his role was big. He had some blocks that were big. He was able to hold down the paint while Evan Mobley was out, and he was able to fulfill his role. Marcus Morris Sr., you can argue more so that he's in the George Niang category from today. He didn't do a whole lot, but he was out the court catching some cardio. Anyway, but everybody else, it felt like talking about Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley didn't have the greatest offensive game. 5 blocks, 16 rebounds. That doesn't go without saying. That is huge, and not only to mention that Jared Allen is out in this Game 7. Then you talk about Max Strus. He had a few 3-pointers that we knew he needed to get for this series to get going. Sam Merrill, huge minutes in the second quarter, huge 3-pointers. He was the only person to make 3-pointers in the entire first half. And then in the third quarter, Max Strus in like the first 6 minutes said, I can do that. and then knocked down a couple 3-pointers of his own to bring that total to 4. And then they kept on going from there. You look at Darius Garland. Darius Garland didn't have a great first half. Darius Garland didn't have a great first 3 quarters, if we're being really honest. He had the opposite of what he did the other day. He had 3 good quarters in the other game, and today he had 3 bad quarters and a good fourth quarter. That's how it sliced sometimes. It just happens like that. And then Isaac Okoro. You talk about defensive prowess. You talk about the challenge of guarding Paolo Banchero. We can all agree Paolo Banchero is going to be a monster in this league in the next few years. But I think you can look down this list. We talked about everybody stepping up. Who do y'all think stepped up in the biggest moment for this Cavs team in Game 7? Jimmy, I'm going to let you start.
In Game 7?
I mean, okay. You're writing about him. I would think that you would have your answer.
Karras, right? I'm thinking bigger picture. I mean, I think Evan. I want to make an Evan Mobley point, but yes, okay. Karras, the fortitude that Karras showed after get like 9 points in 3 playoff games, and then coming and again, as I said earlier, like steadying a sinking ship really in the first part of that. In the first part of that game when he got inserted in the game, in a point where like they not because JB Bickerstaff was like, you know what, it's Karras time. Like it's because Darius Garland and Max Strus were in foul trouble for a lot of that first half, so it was kind of out of necessity. They almost Karras was going to get run anyways, but it was almost out of necessity. And then weirdly, those circumstances kind of played to Karras's benefit because the part of the rub for Karras, not part of the rub of his existence, honestly. This is the tricky part about his fit on this team is that he likes to be on the ball, and the Cavs' 2 best offensive players also like to be on the ball, and he's usually sharing the court with one of them. So the fact that he got a little bit of early run because Darius went to the bench might have helped kickstart him a little bit, get a few more on-ball opportunities. I thought, and I think it will be interesting going forward, that JB Bickerstaff said after the game that he blamed himself a little bit for some of Karras' struggles in this series. And then when I asked Karras about that and what could be done to jumpstart his rhythm or whatever you want to call it a little sooner, he just said, play me more. So, okay, but it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation, Karras, where it's like you need to play more to produce, but you need to produce to play more. You know what I mean? So right. I think the answer for him is probably do some more stuff that JB Bickerstaff likes besides being on the ball, right? Like lock in on defense. That'll help you out. That'll get you more touches. But also I want to make a bigger picture every Mobley point because I think over the course of 7 games, he was probably the second most valuable player on the team, even considering the great 5-game stint that Jared Allen gave in this series. The Cavs, like Orlando's identity was hampered by Evan Mobley in this series.
Right.
And
that's correct.
He is like, again, another situation where he was a great defensive player last year. He was, 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting last year?
Yeah.
I just don't know if he would have handled the repeated beatings that the Magic give people at the rim as well last year as he did this year. I mean, they are relentless. They challenge you all the time. And in multiple, I have questions about how much of this was them trying to test Evan's physicality and how much of this was Wendell Carter maybe going a little bit off the reservation sometimes. But Wendell Carter tried him a couple times today. And Evan Mobley said, no, I'm not going to have that. Offensively, still not where you want to be, particularly with the 6 turnovers, and some of them were ugly.
Yeah.
That last one in the fourth quarter when he threw it away after a rebound was ugly. It's a good summation of where Evan Mobley is right now, though. Like, he is defensively everything you could ever want, even if offensively there leaves something to be desired. And because defense is half the game, but people don't see it that way, I think the offensive shortcomings maybe get highlighted a little bit more. But I think we need to spend more time. I mean, I think we do. We as in us three, but like as a Cavs viewing public, we need to spend more time recognizing how special that guy is.
That's right. That's the thing that I was going to say, Jimmy. And I think you said it well. Sure, he is still developing on the offensive end, and he has a ways to go on the offensive end. He's also only 22 years old. He's been with this organization for 3 years, and he's been in the playoffs twice because he makes, and it's not just him, right? It's a team thing. But part of the reason why they've been in the playoffs 2 out of the 3 years that Evan Mobley's been in the NBA is because he makes such a possession-to-possession impact on the defensive end of the floor. And I just think so much of this, when it comes to young players, so many people focus so much of their attention on what a guy can't do. And it means they miss what a guy can do. And the things that he can do on defense, if we're being totally honest, the things that he can do on a possession-to-possession basis on the defensive end of the floor, you can count on one hand the number of guys that can do those things. And the category of guys that can wreck a game plan defensively, it's like Rudy Gobert, Victor Wembanyama, Anthony Davis, like all of those guys that are perennially going to jeez, tough for me to say. That are going to be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation every single season. Like, Evan is in that category. And, you know, I had a bunch of people sending me some tweets that said JJ Redick and Doris Burke were both talking about Evan, and they were referring to him as an excellent player that has high value based on what he does as a rebounder and a defender. And yes, I think the Cavs want him to evolve more as an offensive threat. I think it would obviously raise the ceiling of this team offensively, and it would make it a lot easier to continue forward with the Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley thing if he becomes a better, more polished, more diverse offensive player. In the meantime, the things that he does defensively and from a rebounding standpoint help the Cavs win games. And I've said this since he was drafted. Evan Mobley is the kind of guy where production doesn't always tell the entire story. It's about impact. And few guys on this roster find a way to consistently impact winning at the level that Evan does. And I just don't think that should go overlooked, despite the fact that, yeah, sometimes he's soft with the basketball and he turns it over. Sometimes he's got stone hands and he can't catch the pocket passes from Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell. Yes, sometimes he is going to get out-muscled, and sometimes he is going to be physically overmatched, especially if he has to shift to center. But, like, that shouldn't take away from all of the brilliance that he provides, especially on the defensive end of the floor. Like, just look at Paolo's numbers in this series in a head-to-head matchup against Evan. That's Paolo Banchero, who a lot of people think could potentially be the face of the league one day. And, yeah, Paolo's still a young player, and he's going through growing pains on the playoff stage. But for Evan to be able to match up with him and match up with Wendell Carter Jr. and be able to guard Franz Wagner and at times be able to be a weak side help defender and at times be able to be a primary rim protector. Like, that's a lot of responsibilities baked into a 22-year-old kid. And he handled himself well enough in this series for the Cavs.
Not just the blocks either. 5 blocks today. 21 for the series, I think, which was the most by anyone in the first round. Too. Yeah, 21, which was most by anyone in the first round. Granted, no one else played 7 games, but still, I believe he was ahead by 10 blocks. So I think he would have, if
Yeah.
we could account that for per game, I think it would have worked. But it's not just the blocks. It's like, it's just so noticeable when Paolo goes up, even when Paolo's mostly won the fight against whoever's guarding him, he gets to the rim. It's so different when he attacks Evan at the rim than when he attacks everyone else. Yep. And today there was one play, and there was many plays during the series like this, but today there was one play where Paolo took a power dribble, started to look at the rim, saw Evan there, and said, "No, I'm all right. Yep. I'll try and find a different shot." That's the last level of defensive dominance. Is guys aren't even trying you anymore, and he's already there.
This was Evan Mobley in the matchup against Paolo, and understanding that NBA.com matchup stuff can be pretty wonky, right? But I think we have to point this out. Evan Mobley against Paolo Banchero. Banchero was 16 of 50 from the field, 32%, 4 of 13 from three-point range, 31%, and he had 9 turnovers in his matchup minutes against Evan Mobley. Wendell Carter Jr., when Evan Mobley had to switch over to him, especially with Jared Allen missing the final 3 games of the series, Wendell Carter Jr. scored a grand total of 18 points against Evan Mobley on 8 of 23 from the field, 34.8%, and 2 of 9 from three-point range, 22%. Like, that is some incredible high-level defense against some pretty important players for the Magic. I mean, Carter Jr. was a guy who, going into the starting lineup following Game 2, flipped the series momentarily. And we all know just how great Paolo Banchero is. The majority of Paolo's production in this series came against guys not named Evan Mobley.
And, oh, by the way, Evan Mobley made the game-winning block in Game 5, right. Game-sealing block. Who knows what happens if that game goes to overtime? But we will never know because Evan Mobley pinned that against the glass.
Yeah. And so I think Evan Mobley has shown a lot defensively since he's been here. Like, we can all agree on that part. And I want to go back to what Jimmy was talking about. I tried to hop in, but that y'all were cooking. I could not interrupt. But Jimmy was talking about Caris LeVert and playing alongside Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. And there was a point in today's game, in Game 7, where Donovan Mitchell, one who was also on a hobbled knee and potentially didn't want to bring the ball up this possession, but Caris LeVert was getting a little bit hotter, and Donovan just said, "No, you take it and run the offense and go get a bucket." Like, Donovan wasn't even past half court yet, and he are already giving the ball up to Caris to bring it up and get the actions moving and do whatever. And Caris went to the bucket and got it to the cup. So I think that's something that I wanted to add in for that conversation, as well as talking about Evan Mobley in the sense of being a quote-unquote unicorn. We've gotten into a lot of cliches throughout this series, that being one of them. And I feel like he's a guy, quite like Jared Allen, who's quiet, doesn't have this huge, roaring personality that you really don't like. He is a unicorn because he's quiet, mysterious, and you don't know what's going on in his head. Like, that's what a unicorn really is. It's a rare breed. But I remember, to close the game, the Cavaliers had the game won. There's no reason to be going hard on defense or whatever, but it's Evan Mobley. He's in the paint. He says, "No, there are 37.1 seconds left on the clock. I'm going to block Paolo Banchero. Okay, go ahead, get the rebound." Franz Wagner goes up, misses the layup because Evan's standing there. I believe Franz Wagner was 1 of 11 on the night. And then Jonathan Isaac got the offensive rebound. Evan Mobley's still in there, and he just shovels it out to Caris LeVert, and they get the ball back to end the game. Like, 3 different attempts at the cup for the Orlando Magic to end the game, and the reaction that Evan Mobley had to his stellar defensive stop was a hand clap. 1 hand clap. And everybody on the bench is screaming, and there's the get that weak stuff out of here coming from the PA system. Like, it's just an understanding of what he is able to bring. And I read, like I said earlier, I'd be reading all the stuff throughout the game. And Evan Mobley was like, people were talking about trade Evan Mobley, get rid of Evan Mobley. He's not doing anything offensively. Like we've said on this podcast a number of times, there's more to it than just offense. And Evan Mobley is a valuable piece of this core and of this team. And not only to mention, based on the unicorn conversation, because I wrote about that for tomorrow, Evan Mobley got one unicorn horn for his own when he took Jalen Suggs's from the Orlando Magic. And next up, if he plays, is Kristaps Porzingis. So if you don't know, Jalen Suggs is a part of Unicorn Fam, which is like a variation of Jelly Fam and Jam Fam or whatever. It's like a high school phenom thing that started in like years ago. And then obviously, as we were talking before the podcast, Kristaps Porzingis might be the OG unicorn, basketball unicorn in the league. So that's a whole different thing. But
you lost me on the Jalen Suggs thing, but
I still don't know what's happening with Jalen Suggs and unicorns.
That's okay.
No.
The cool
Chris,
kids
you
might
said,
know about it.
Yeah, the new kids might know. No, Chris, so let me explain it to you because you want this to be fresh and clean and up to date. We're going to keep you guys hip now. So Jalen Green was called a unicorn in high school. And obviously Jalen Green has a more of a personality than most people. So he was gaining social media platforms. This is when Overtime and House of Highlights and all this stuff were like doing features on him, and because he was the number one ESPN ranked player in the draft class or the recruiting class of 2020. So he was blowing up doing that, and Jelly Fam had already became a thing, which is like doing pretty layups around the basket, Kyrie-esque moves, I guess. And then everybody was like, oh, this is blowing up, so we want to create our own thing. Slam Fam, which I believe was created by Zion Williamson, became a thing. And then because Jalen Green of the Houston Rockets was called a unicorn, he was like, I'm a create Unicorn Fam. And I went and did some digging to find out who was a part of Unicorn Fam. And Jalen Suggs was on that list.
Okay.
Because Jalen Suggs was number 6 in the ESPN 2020 rankings for high school recruits. And they be doing the little unicorn motion or whatever when they do a play. Or they did when they were in high school, at least.
Well, let's just say I didn't have this angle of the conversation on my bingo card for this podcast, but I'll defer to you on that one, Ethan. You're a little bit more hip than me. You're a little bit more cool. I'm just going to throw some more Evan Mobley stats at you. How about that?
Stat me down.
In the 2024 NBA playoffs so far, and Jimmy, you brought this up a little bit in terms of his blocks, contested shots. Evan Mobley, 102. The next closest to Evan Mobley is Brook Lopez at 66. Behind him, Isaiah Hartenstein and Joel Embiid at 65. And then in terms of loose balls recovered, Josh Hart has 13 because he's just ridiculous. Evan Mobley, 12.
That's staggering. Even more staggering, I looked this up earlier today, and I don't think it included. I'm trying to remember about the Knicks series last year, but Evan Mobley has fouled out twice in his career, which is just like for a guy who again contests that many shots,
right,
and is challenged that often. It's everything. It's like the perfect combination of defender, right? Like incredible at blocking shots when the opportunity is presented. Knows how to defend without fouling when he needs to. The verticality, he is a master of it. You can't say. And I'm still a little. I'm not gonna lie. I'm still tripping up a little bit over the Unicorn Fam thing. I don't quite understand it, but Evan Mobley deserves to be under whatever unicorn category we are creating here.
On defense. Yes.
On defense. Yes.
Correct.
I'm sorry that I tripped you up. I apologize.
It's all right.
I will never be interesting again. Moving back over to Game 7, I mean, you talk about what Evan Mobley was doing. We talked about what Karis LeVert was doing. I think we got to talk about what Sam Merrill did in the second quarter, because we had talked about how he could impact this series at the beginning. We talked about how he could be getting minutes. We talked about it after Game 6, how he should be getting minutes at this point because of how George Niang was not shooting the ball. They wanted to shoot more threes and things of that nature.
And how Karis was playing too, yeah.
At the time, yes.
Right.
Sam Merrill came into the game again with limited minutes, and instead of missing his first 2 shots, he made his first 2 shots. And that was the difference for what the Cavs needed, one in the second quarter, and for him from his role to get extended minutes as well. Chris, I mean, you called it. We talked about it already. We talked about how important this was going to be. But to see it come to fruition, to see him do that, and then also to see him not really get that many minutes in the second half, what was your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, I mean, he did what the Cavs needed him to do, right? And I think it's hard, but that's Sam Merrill's role on this team. And we've talked about this throughout the entire season. It's just like, he is a weapon that you can bring off the bench in certain moments. And it was clear that JB Bickerstaff was unhappy with things on the offensive end. They were stagnant. They were bogged down. They had not enough spacing. They had not enough shooting. They had missed 13 of their first 17 shots to open the game. So they needed to do something to loosen up the Orlando defense. And Sam has the ability to do that. And it helps a lot for this offense, and it helps a lot for Sam Merrill's confidence, and it helps a lot for JB Bickerstaff's faith in Sam when he's knocking down shots. That's a difference. It's a very, very hard role that Sam is in. I was talking to multiple people close to him about this, and for a guy to know, like, I'm only going to get a couple of shots. If I don't make those shots, and if I give up a driving layup, or if I get beat on defense or something like that, I'm going to get yanked out of the game. But for him in a Game 7 to come in at a time where the Cavs desperately needed an offensive boost, where they desperately needed somebody that could loosen up the defense, he answered the call. And you have to give him a lot of credit for that. I just think he's going to continue to be in a role because of some of his deficiencies that JB Bickerstaff sees, that JB Bickerstaff recognizes, that JB Bickerstaff believes Sam Merrill has. I just think he's going to be in this role where it's going to be more on a need basis. What does the game call for? What does the matchup call for? What lineups are out there for the opposing team where maybe I can get away with him playing? What do I need more offense? Do I need more defense? Like those kinds of things. But in saying all of that, like, it is a value to this team to have a guy like that, an option like that on the bench that you can go to. And he can bring this type of ability. And he only played 6 seconds in the second half. But part of that was Karis LeVert was playing well in the second half. And Isaac Okoro's defense was just something that you couldn't take off the floor. And Max Strus was banging threes in the third quarter. He scored 11 points in the third quarter to complement Donovan Mitchell. So it's just going to continue to be a situational thing. And part of his role is doing what he did in the first half. So when you're looking at it, even though he didn't play in the second half but 6 seconds, he did his job for this team. He did the things that make him a valued commodity.
First of all, I want to congratulate the subtexters on their Sam Merrill victory lap. It's a big moment for them. I'm not so convinced that JB Bickerstaff isn't subscribed after watching how the rotations have unfolded in this series over the course of 7 games. Who knows? If so, we appreciate you, JB, always. for supporting the podcast and all of our endeavors. But to the Sam Merrill point, yeah, he's going to be a bit guy, have a bit role pretty much no matter what in high-level playoff series because he is such a blinking target on the defensive end. But I do think that it cannot be overstated. One, how hard it was for him to come through in this situation with this on this stage with this kind of pressure, with the limited reps that he's had, and as a product of that, how much credibility you earn, both with your teammates and I would think with the coaching staff for doing so. What Sam Merrill did today does not mean that Sam Merrill is now the eighth man by any means, but it does make JB Bickerstaff more willing to break the Sam Merrill glass in case of emergency in the Celtics series if things get a little bit stagnant offensively. By the way, not to step on our Celtics preview, that's probably going to happen a couple times because Boston's defense is also really freaking good and switchy. And you are going to, I should have made this point with Karras earlier, the Cavs are going to need as many different sources of offensive creation as they can possibly get against that team because there just aren't any weak spots, particularly with perimeter defenders, at least in the starting lineup for the Celtics, right? Drew Holiday is all-world defender. Derek White is an all-world defender. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they got the goods, man. And then Al Horford he's getting up there, and we'll see about Porzingis. But this is a big moment for Sam Merrill that I think could portend. I think that's the word. Other big-ish moments.
Yeah. So the other thing that I think we have to bring up is that, whether JB Bickerstaff is right or wrong, and I think it's up for debate, in his view of Sam Merrill, in his usage of Sam Merrill, it's consistent, right? It's inconsistent in terms of how many minutes he gets per game, but the viewpoint of this coaching staff and JB in particular of Sam Merrill is consistent. And it's basically, if you're going to make shots for us, you're going to continue to play. If you're going to be a plus for us on the offensive end to offset some of the questions that we have about you defensively, to offset some of the limitations that we have defensively when you're in the game, then we're going to continue to roll with you. That is his role. Right or wrong, that is his role. Right or wrong, JB Bickerstaff's going to have a longer leash for Max Strus. Right or wrong, he's going to have a longer leash for Karis LeVert. Right or wrong, he's going to have a longer leash for Isaac Okoro. It doesn't mean that JB doesn't have a plan for Sam. There is a plan in place for Sam. It's just not one that this fan base is willing to accept.
I think, what the funniest thing is we can talk about the shot making of Sam Merrill and how the arena probably erupted almost as loud as I had heard it when he made his second one tonight. But JB Bickerstaff's favorite point of Sam Merrill's game tonight was when he took a charge. Was when he took a charge. Yes. I looked down at the sideline, and JB Bickerstaff is almost at half court, on the court, trying to get to Sam Merrill, pointing at him and clapping it up and trying to get him hyped up, knowing how big of a defensive stop it was. But JB Bickerstaff as a defensive coach and also knowing Sam Merrill's liabilities on the defensive end, he said, "You did that. You did that. You did that. Good job." And I thought it was hilarious just watching him and seeing how he reacted to that. But is there anything left from this game that you want to touch on before we wrap up today's podcast? Chris, Jimmy?
Real quick, because we're talking about JB and Sam right now, I just wanted to point out, I'm not sure that, there's a massive point to be made here, but while we're talking about figures in this series who took a step, I thought JB, I honestly don't know I think JB played 10 guys in the first half.
Yeah.
Which again is part a reflection of how little he trusts everybody to start this game, right? But also part of like at some point you just got to pick something and go with it. Like it might signal a lack of conviction. And in the second half, once he found, I mean, it helped that Max Strus and Karis LeVert started playing really well. He played 6 dudes. I mean, Tristan played 3 minutes, but like I think that there was. I don't know if okay. Let me ask that. I wonder if there was more room for those kind of shortened rotations earlier in the series, or going forward and against Boston.
Can I ask a question to Chris before we do this? Because I know that I understand where you're coming from with that, Jimmy. And I think one of the Athletic guys asked a question during JB Bickerstaff's press conference, was like, where did you come up with that rotation? Because there was a rotation to start the second quarter, I believe.
That did not work.
Didn't work, one. And two, was just a mesh of players that I don't think we've seen on the court before. And JB Bickerstaff was like, I don't think I've used that one before. So what was your thought, Chris, one on the JB Bickerstaff being willing to do something like that and then snatching it back when he realized that wasn't working?
I don't know if it's allowed in this town to praise JB Bickerstaff in any kind of way, right? I get criticized all the time for trying to justify some of his decisions or provide reasons for some of his decisions.
Just see the logic.
Yeah, right. I thought he had a good game overall as a coach. And that doesn't mean that he's perfect. And it doesn't mean that he's going to go into this series against Boston and be the better tactician than Joe Mazzulla. And it doesn't mean that JB, all of a sudden, like all of the flaws that he has showed throughout his coaching tenure are corrected and everything is fine. But I thought today for Game 7, his first ever Game 7 as a head coach, I thought he pushed the right buttons for the most part. He put Okoro back in the starting lineup for Marcus Morris Sr. He went to Sam Merrill early and stuck with him. He was willing to do that. He made a tough decision to pull Darius Garland for Karis LeVert early in the third quarter. That wasn't all foul trouble. That was effectiveness. And it happened about 2 minutes earlier than it usually does. It would have happened 2 minutes earlier than the 2 minutes that it did. But there was no stoppage in play at that point. Like Karis was waiting at the scorer's table to take the place of Darius Garland because, he was just off to a terrible start in the second half. So he went away from Darius for Karis. He went to the whole look of Donovan Mitchell running the show with 3 wings and 1 big, something that obviously worked for them at the time that Darius Garland and Evan Mobley were missing simultaneously when they went on that huge run to flip their season. He yanked George Niang after 3 minutes and then didn't play him at all in the second half. Like, yeah, it's fair to wonder why did JB use Niang in the first place, but he recognized that he wasn't effective. He pulled him out of the game, and he didn't use him in the second half. And Niang is a key piece of this rotation. Niang is a big reason why the Cavs got the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. I thought JB picked the right moments to call on Tristan Thompson, allowing Evan Mobley to get enough of a rest on the bench and then keep him fresh for the end of the game so he wasn't completely gassed out late, so he didn't look completely exhausted and ineffective late in the game like he did in Game 6. He obviously made halftime adjustments that worked. Like, if we're going to sit here and say, like, when the Cavs crumble in the second half on the road against Orlando, that's a reflection of JB and his lack of adjustments, and if we're going to sit here and say that he's not quick enough to make certain decisions on the fly and stuff like that, if they have a successful half like they did today, a second half where they outscored Orlando 63-41, like, are we only going to say that that's player driven? Are we only going to say that that's execution driven? Are we just going to ignore potential adjustments that he made in the second half because it's not convenient to the narrative? 63-41, guys, in the second half against Orlando. Held them to 4 of 24 from the field in the third quarter, 15 points in the third quarter. JB is the guy responsible for the defensive game plan, right? JB is the guy responsible for the defensive principles. JB is the guy who has built this entire organization on the defensive end of the floor, and that, in large part, is what led to the Game 7 win. Are we not going to give him credit for that? He also, like you said, Ethan, he unveiled and was willing to go to a 5-man lineup that hadn't seen the court together at any point this season, and when it didn't work, he took it away. So I don't know. It doesn't mean that he was perfect, and it doesn't mean that he did everything right, and his coach's challenge was completely bizarre and emotionally driven, and he's got to be better when it comes to that. But, for all of the heat that he has taken and the boost that he got in pregame introductions, I thought he pushed some pretty smart right buttons in this Game 7, and he most certainly didn't seem overmatched from a coaching chess match situation.
All right. Game 7 win. The first time the Cavaliers reached the second round since 2018. Once again, shout out LeBron. And the first time that they reached the second round without LeBron James since 1993. So, the
shout
biggest thing. You just had to, didn't you? All right.
All those other guys. There was another key moment in this game, too, guys, that I don't think can go overlooked here either. And it's what I wrote about for cleveland.com. Donovan Mitchell's decision in the midst of an epic Game 7 performance for him to pass the ball to Darius Garland. Like, that was a calculated thing. And it reminded me a little bit. And again, when you bring up comparisons to things, it's not always going to be apples to apples. It's not going to be the perfect comparison. I don't know that there is a perfect comparison. But there was a moment early on in the 2014 season when LeBron James came back and the Cavs built their big three of LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love. And during that game, LeBron purposely just stood in the corner. And he just let Kyrie Irving dribble himself into failure. And he did it on purpose because he was teaching Kyrie a lesson. And because he was trying to break the bad habits that Kyrie had from early in his career where he was trying to do everything on his own. Again, this is a different kind of situation. These are different players. But Donovan Mitchell, to me, passing up a shot at the rim to get Darius Garland an open three, that was purposeful. That was about the bigger picture. Just like LeBron and what he was doing, he was willing to sacrifice a win on the road because of the bigger picture. Donovan Mitchell, in a game where he could have scored 40 again, he was looking at the bigger picture and he was saying to himself, I'm going to empower my teammate. I'm going to uplift my teammate. He recognized how much Darius needed that moment. And Donovan recognized how much the franchise needed Darius to have that moment. And it wasn't just worth 3 points to me. And it wasn't just the typical timeout-inducing bucket. It was more than that. It was Donovan saying, look, if we're going to make a deep postseason run, if we're going to have a shot at Boston, any kind of shot whatsoever against Boston, if we're going to evolve as this team that we need to be, if I'm going to grow alongside Darius Garland, and this team is going to grow with me and Darius as, the dynamic backcourt, the two really, really important drivers of this offense, I can't do it all by myself. Like, I need that guy as my sidekick that can handle Game 7, my sidekick that can handle the pressure of the playoffs, my sidekick that can go on the road with me to TD Garden and maybe find a way to be competitive against the Celtics in a house of horrors. To me, like, Donovan learned from the end of Game 6 on the road against Orlando. He scored 50, guys, and it wasn't enough because he just didn't trust his teammates enough. He had opportunities to pass the ball to Evan Mobley, chose not to. Had opportunities to pass the ball to Darius Garland, chose not to. and I don't think it was an epiphany by any means. Donovan talked about it coming into this postseason. I can't do it all by myself. It's got to be a team thing. But for him to go out in Game 6 and score 22 straight points, starting in the third quarter, carrying over all the way to the fourth quarter, scoring 50 in that game and having it be a loss, for him, like, I think that was a situation where it just became even more evident that maybe in these late game situations, I have to approach it a little bit differently. And for him, it was really, really important to get Darius that wide open 3-point shot. Not because of today's game against Orlando specifically, but because of what's going to be required to beat a team the caliber of the Boston Celtics.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because I think there's a lot there. I'm going to start with the Donovan end of it and what you said about the 50-point game. So we can tie JB in here too, actually, because a lot was made after Game 6 about why wasn't JB doing more to get the offense moving, right? It's just Donovan and 4 guys out there. I'm just spitballing here. What if Donovan likes it that way sometimes? What if when a star player has it going, he doesn't feel like he needs a lot more than just give me the ball and get out of the way until, of course, that stops working. But I think this is kind of a lesson that every great player has to go through. We've kind of lost the moniker and the archetype of the true point guard over the years, but it's like every superstar kind of has to have some of those traits now, like lead ball, primary ball handler, whatever. The guy who is going to be running your offense when the game really matters needs to have some of those same traits. And what you're talking about with what Donovan did for Darius today, like that's some Steve Nash, Andre Miller. I'm trying to think of another classic point guard, John Stockton type
LeBron
stuff.
James
right
is not a
sure,
classic
LeBron.
point guard, but he did it.
For sure. Exactly. He's more of the modern. Him and Luka Doncic are more of like the modern version of that, where like no one would call you like a cookie cutter point guard, but you still have all of the intangibles that a true point guard back in the day would require. So Donovan said, this guy is out of sorts, out of rhythm. He needs a shot. Everyone has a dad who watches a lot of basketball who will tell you that we don't have point guards who know when guys need a shot anymore, who know when guys need a touch, right? Donovan Mitchell knew Darius Garland needed a touch. That's really important. Really important. It's important that Darius Garland made that shot.
Yes.
The other side of that coin is it's a little problematic that Donovan Mitchell felt that way about Darius Garland in that moment. Like, I love that it happened. I love that he got Darius the shot. It doesn't speak super highly of where we are with the Darius Garland experience right now. It doesn't speak super highly of how he handled the Game 7 to that point or the playoffs to this point, although I thought he was obviously really good in the first quarter of Game 5 and for parts of Game 6. But like, it just feels like that when a guy like that feels the need to, I'm going to say, breathe some confidence into you, suggests to me that you might be lacking a little bit. And I don't know. I think we can all hope that maybe that moment can flip a switch for Darius and he's ready for the Boston series, completely different guy. But I think it also might tell me that he's kind of in a fragile place right now and we might not be done with the struggles.
I think that this is an interesting topic, and I wrote about this for cleveland.com tomorrow as well, talking about more so the Darius Garland has talked about all season how he's played against guys he considers his brothers, big brother, little brother, whatever it may be. Donovan Mitchell is his big brother. And there's nobody that can speak life into you like your big brother. And there's nobody that can tell you what you need in situations like your big brother. And Darius Garland being the little brother, Donovan Mitchell said this too. there's nobody that talks smack to you or tells you that you need to do something or up your game like your little brother does either. So I think I understand what you're saying, Jimmy, with being careful with that. But when you're not having the game that you're having, when you're supposed to be this max deal player and you hear the boos and you're still a young guy, you're still 24 years old and you're hearing all of these things, it can weigh on you. And your performance, also how you hold yourself to a higher standard, can come into play as well. Like we saw Darius Garland not upset, but frustrated with himself. He went to the bench, smacked the chair, and had to get his arm, like Donovan Mitchell come over and put his arm around him and be like, hey, you don't suck. You just got to be better. And that's one of those things where it's like, Donovan knew what he needed. And I think that's a big thing for their relationship. And we've talked about these guys being able to play together, not being able to play together. The fact that they find each other to have that relationship, that they find each other to be brothers. They come in almost every time they talk about each other, that they say that they love each other. Like, that's a dynamic that basketball cannot relate to. And this team has said that about everybody that they played with on this team. And Chris wrote earlier this season, because I had to go back and do some research, about when Donovan Mitchell just went ham on anybody that was trying to scrutinize Darius Garland. And that is the moment for me that I went back to, that was like, he needed to go back and say, I don't care what the doubters say. And he said it today. I don't care what you think. I don't care what happened in the first half. I don't care about any about that. Be you. And I think for your point, Jimmy, for Donovan to say, don't be somebody else. Go be somebody else. He said, be you. That's like a confidence thing that Donovan Mitchell has in Darius, that play can change, but the relationship and the love and the belief is something that cannot be deterred, I don't think.
I think I just happen to believe, I'm not trying to criticize Darius necessarily. I just happen to believe that confidence is a more fragile thing than professional athletes try to convince us that it is. I think that, so example from today, Karis LeVert says his first bucket is a layup, and boom, he's just, that's all he needed. He's off and running. And I believe him when he says that. I think that it can flip a switch like that quick. I mean, like, anyone who's played basketball knows, like, you get that first basket to go, it helps. I also believe the inverse is true. Not that any shot you miss can ruin your confidence, but like, if you miss 4 or 5, you start to think about it a little bit. And so that's more of what I mean with the Darius thing. Like, he just had a rough day out there today. He's had a couple of rough days in the playoffs. So I think he's thinking about it a little bit sometimes. And Donovan, when that was a great moment that ESPN captured on the bench when Donovan was talking to Darius and trying to pick him up. I just think that it also is good that that's happening from Donovan's end. It just also tells me something about where Darius is, that Donovan feels he needs to do that.
I also think from Donovan's standpoint that he recognizes what this organization has done to commit itself to Darius, and he recognizes that if he stays in Cleveland, more than likely, not to say that this couldn't change, but more than likely, it means Darius is going to be critical to Donovan's success throughout his prime, right? And again, that could change. The Cavs could decide to move on from Darius Garland in the offseason. They could look at potential trade offers to rejigger the roster and just make it a little bit more balanced. But this is an organization that committed to Darius. This is an organization that paid Darius. And if Donovan is going to have the success that he wants to have in the playoffs, he's got to bring Darius along with him. And Darius has to be ready for that level of stress, that level of pressure, those expectations, and everything that it's required to make a deep playoff run. And I think Donovan has tried all season long in various ways, behind the scenes, in public, to like empower Darius, instill confidence in him, and bring him along with him and say, find a way to get to my level, right? Find a way to be the running mate, and not in a negative way, in any sort of way, but find a way to be the running mate that I know you can be for me. You know what I mean? And Donovan just understands. He might even understand it better than Darius understands it himself. The level of importance to Darius and Darius's importance to this franchise. I'm not sure fully that Darius has grasped that.
Yeah,
I mean, sorry. It's like a healthy challenge, and it's an investment in Darius now, as in fourth quarter, as in next round, and Darius 2 years from now.
Right.
If Donovan's going to be here. Honestly, even not. Like, Donovan is also, like, this obviously is good beyond basketball. Like, he just wants to see Darius succeed in general. So, yeah, he's investing in Darius. I just think it takes on a little bit of a different tone when you're struggling.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely does. And I think what Chris was saying comes back to the entire point of Darius Garland plays better when he's having fun. When he has joy, when he's running around smiling with that big ear-to-ear grin that he has, like, he is the life of this team. When he's happy, when he's joyful, that pushes people to a different level. And Donovan knows that he needs to get that happy-go-lucky, joyful Darius to be there. Good, bad, ugly, whatever. You have to be even-keeled and playing your game. And I think it showed itself in the stupidest way possible when Darius hit that three, and then he goes and smacks hands with a fan, and Donovan's there to hug him afterwards, and Darius goes, man, my hand hurts. He smacked my hand hard. And I was like, are you kidding me? If you just hurt yourself because you were celebrating and getting into it, Donovan's going to be mad. But he was there to embrace and all the other stuff. Right. And I just to see him holding his hand and looking at his hand, and I'm like, Darius, you can't take anything seriously if things are going well for you. And maybe that's the ignorant bliss or the delusion that he needs to play in at all times, because after that, it was go and all engines were go for Darius. But we are an hour and 20 minutes into this podcast, and I think we got to wrap up because me and Chris got to catch some flights. I know I still got to pack, but things got to happen. So that will wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to subscribe to Subtext. Y'all remember when I said yesterday that Chris might have the insight on Jared Allen? He did. I'm telling you now, you need to subscribe so you can get that inside intel when we get to Boston, because that's the only way you're going to get it. But you can do so by going to cleveland.com/Cavs and clicking on the blue bar at the top of the page. Or you can just sign up for a 14-day free trial. 14 days free during the playoffs? That could not be 14 days? So it sounds like a pretty good bargain to me. But if you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy Watkins. So, y'all be safe. We